Okay, let's get started with section 5.5. Today we'll be talking about two things, the greatest common factor and factoring by grouping. So we'll begin with the greatest common factor. This is abbreviated GCF, greatest common factor. The greatest common factor means the greatest, meaning the largest, common, it has to be common to both the things that we're looking at, factor. Now, factor is the only word that's a little confusing there. A factor is a number that divides another number evenly without getting a decimal or remainder, however how you're looking at it, okay? So let's begin with a simple problem with only numbers. Find the greatest common factor of 4 and 24. In other words, what's the biggest number that will divide them evenly? It has to divide both of them. Usually you can look at this and you can say 4 divides 4 and 4 divides 24, so 4 is the greatest common factor. If you don't notice that, you may want to factor this. 4 is 2 times 2, right? This is called the prime factorization when I break it down into its smallest factors. 24 is 2 times 12, but 12 will break down into 2 times 6, and 6 will break into 2 times 3. So let's check this. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. So this is what we call the prime factorization. We can also write this in exponent form. This is 2 to the second, and this is 2 to the third multiplied by 3. To get the greatest common factor, it has to be common to both. So you want to pick the lowest power of whatever they have the same. They only have 2's alike, right? And we pick the lowest power. So the greatest common factor of 4 and 24 is 2 to the second, 4. 4 is the largest thing that divides both of them. Okay. A lot of these you'll be able to tell by looking at them without really having to do much work. Now we're going to look at things that have a variable. Let's find the greatest common factor of 15x and 20. And they've written it a little differently on your notes, but this is fine. They don't both have x's in them, so we don't have a common x, so it cannot be part of the common factor. So we're looking for the largest number that will divide 15 and will divide 20. And most of you can tell off the top of your head that's going to be a 5. 5 is the greatest common factor, divisor that will divide them with no remainder. Okay, part C. Let's get the greatest common factor of 15x squared and 20x. Okay. What number do we need? What's the largest number that will divide both of those? 2 will not divide them both. 3 will not divide them both. 4 will not. 5 will. 5 goes into there 3 times, and 5 goes into there 4 times, and so 5 is the greatest common divisor of 15 and 20. Now we have to look at these variables. Since they both have x, x should be able to divide it. We want the greatest one that will divide both of them. Since this only has x to the first, that's as much as we can use with the x. Because x to the second won't divide into here. It would only go in part-time. It's too big to go in, right? Or this is too small to be divided by x squared. So 5x is the common divisor of these. And finally, find the greatest common factor, different word for divisor, 9x squared y and 27x y squared. Okay, let's look at the numeric part first. Let's look at the 9 and the 27. What's the largest number that will divide both of those? Yes, 9. Because 9 divides into 9, and 9 divides evenly into 27. So we need a 9 as part of the greatest common factor. They both have x's, so we pick the lowest power for x, because that's the only one that will go into both of them. They both have y's, so we have a common y. We pick the lowest power for y. Okay, very well. Greatest common factor, number 2. factor out the greatest common factor. Now those were just two separate terms. Here we're going to have 16, this is part A, 16x minus 12, and we're supposed to factor out the greatest common factor. So we look at this piece and figure out what's the greatest common factor. Well, it can't be x because x is only in one of them. So we look at what number will divide 16 and 12 without a remainder. What's the biggest number that will divide? 2 will divide them both, but that's not the biggest. 4 will divide them both, right? 4 is the largest one. So we're going to factor out a 4. Factoring out essentially means that we're unfoiling it, right? We're using the distributive property backward. We're dividing it out. So 16, we're dividing 4 out, so that gives a 4. Because 4 times 4 would put us back to the 16. And we need that x. If we factor a 4 out of this, remember this is 4 times 4, and this is 4 times 3. And we're factoring the 4 out. We're pulling it out. That leaves a minus 3. And you can always check this by multiplying it back through, and you will get a 16x minus 12. So this is what they're asking for, is to show that common factor being pulled out. The whole rest of the chapter almost is devoted to factoring. So this is the beginning of factoring. Common factors. You should always check first for a common factor. Okay, you can look at this and tell what's the largest common thing here. 28, right? Not x, because x is not in the second term. So we pull the 28 out. We divide it out. We undistribute it. This is a 28 times a 1, isn't it? And the same thing here, 28 times a 1. So we're going to have a 1x plus, we have to hold the place for this. We can't just make it disappear. And if we multiply this back through, you can see it will put us back to where we were before we factored it. So we factored out the greatest common factor. Part C, 5x, that's a z, 5z minus 25x z to the 4th, I believe. Let me double check. Yes. Okay. They both have z's in them, and they both have a number that is divisible by 5. 5 divides this, 5 divides that. The common number, greatest common factor, is 5 for the number part. Now let's look at the variable part. We only have an x over here, so we can't use x. But there's a z. We pick the lowest power of z. This is to the first power, right? So we take out a z to the first. And when we divide a 5 out and a z out, anything divided by the same thing, right, makes a 1. So we have to put a 1 there to hold the place for where it was, right? We factored it out. Here we take 25, we divide out the 5, that gives us a 5. This, we divide one of the x's out, and that, one of the z's out, the x sits there alone, and the z is now to the 3rd. So I pulled one of the z's out front, okay? And again, multiply this through, and that's good. Part D. 18x plus 9x squared minus 6x cubed. Okay, they all have x's, and they all have numbers that look like they're divisible by 3's or something like that, right? Let's break this down. This is a 2 times a 3. There's no 2 in here, right? So I need to be looking for 3. This is a 3 times a 3, and this is a 3 times a 6, right? So I'm going to pull the 3 out. What about the x? They all have a common x, so I pick the lowest power, which is x to the first. So I'm going to take a 3x out. So I divide 18 divided by 3 is 6. X divided by x is 1. So that's just a 6. Okay? Multiply this back and you'll see. So I've factored out this 3 and I factored out the x, and it just left a 6. Alright, now we're going to take a 3x out of here. That will leave another 3, because 9 is 3 times 3. There's the other 3. We're taking one of the x's out, right? It's x times x, so there's the other x still left. And you can multiply 3x times 3x gives us 9x squared. It does check. Now I'm dividing negative 6 divided out the 3. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2, right? And x cubed divide out an x is going to give us an x squared. So you can see these other properties of exponents that we've used that's applying here too. Multiply this back to make sure you did it right, and we did. So this is the answer after we remove the greatest common factor. This is factored form. It actually can factor a little more, but we're not to that stage yet. Okay, part D on number 1. Oh, no, part D on number 2. That means we have no more. 2e. Oh, lovely. 18 a to the third b minus 12 ab plus 9 ab squared minus 12 a squared b. We're supposed to factor out the greatest common factor. I'm going to double check that I copied these exponents correctly before we get going here. Okay, and I did. First of all, look at the numbers. 9 is the largest. Will 9 divide everything? No. So it's going to have to be something that divides into 9. 9 is 3 times 3. So 3 is probably my best hope. This is a 3 times a 4, and that's a 3 times a 4, and this is a 3 times a 6. So you can see that all of these have a 3 that I can pull out, a common 3. All right. And so, look at the variables. We have an A. Everything has an A. Take the lowest exponent for A. That's A to the first. So we can pull out an A to the first. And B. There's a B in everything, and the lowest power is B to the first. So I put 3AB is the greatest common factor. Now I'm going to factor it out, divide it out. So I'm taking 18, divide out the 3, gives me 6. A to the third, divide out an A, gives me A squared. B, divide the B out, the B's are gone. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. A divided by A is no A's. B divided by B, no B's. Okay, so that's fine. Plus, I take 9, divide out a 3, that leaves a 3. A, divide out the A. B squared, take one of the B's out, leaves another B here. Minus, negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. You can also think of canceling these out when you pull them out and seeing what's left. That's a good way to do it. A squared, and I pulled the A out, so that's an A and B. Oh, I took the B out too, so that's my bracket, yeah. Okay. Now, are any of these alike? We have A squared and A, number, B, no. So this is my answer in factored form, 2E. Looks good to me. Okay, and finally to F. This is going to get us ready for factoring by grouping, which is a special technique for factoring large polynomials. Okay, first of all, how many terms do we have here? Things that are multiplied together, this is one big term, and this is another term. It's like a 1 times this. So we have 2 terms. So looking at those 2, what do they have in common? Well, obviously they have in common a y minus 5. Okay, if I pull that y minus 5 out, I factor it out, what's left in this first piece? The 3x. If I factor out the y minus 5 in this piece, what's left? You must put a 1 to hold the place for it, because anything divided by the same thing leaves a 1. Okay, so this is the answer in factored form. And that's just kind of weird to see. You can circle the part you're taking out, put it out front, and here's what's left. Here's the 3x. And this place is held by the 1. Very good. Okay, and that was F on number 2. Okay, we're going to do factor by grouping. I'm going to put that in the next part on this video, so this will end part 1. I'll see you in just a second for factoring by grouping.